if you get in the seat here, there is so much room for like
everything, right?
Yeah. You could get like a bicycle exercise machine.
Imagine a car in the late 1940s that looked like it had landed from the future. A car with seatbelts when most cars didn't even think about safety. A car with a rear engine, a padded dashboard, disc brakes, fuel injection ideas, and a center headlight that turned with the steering wheel. This wasn't science fiction. This was the Tucker 48, built by Preston Tucker, a man who believed America deserved something better than the same old designs rolling out of Detroit. The war had just ended and people wanted new cars. Detroit was ready to sell them vehicles, but most companies were only updating old pre-war models. Preston Tucker wanted to break that cycle. He had a bold vision, design the safest, fastest, and most advanced car in the world. He promised a car that could do 120 miles per hour, deliver 20 miles per gallon, and protect passengers like never before. It was sleek, aerodynamic, and futuristic. Even the doors were designed for safety, curving into the roof to make entering easier. When Tucker unveiled the prototype in 1947, people were stunned. It looked nothing like the boxy cars of Ford, GM, or Chrysler. It looked alive. The crowd gasped at the swiveling headlight, the aircraft-inspired engine, and the way the car seemed to glide across the stage. Newspapers called it the car of tomorrow. Families dreamed of owning one. Investors rushed in, pouring money into Tucker's company. But the problem was not the dream. The problem was that Detroit's big three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, saw the Tucker 48 as a direct threat. If Preston Tucker succeeded, he would expose the giants for selling outdated, unsafe, and uninspired cars. Imagine being a billion-dollar industry and suddenly a small startup with a fraction of your resources builds something light years ahead. Fear turned into anger. Behind the scenes, whispers spread. Powerful men in Detroit did not want the Tucker 48 on the streets. They knew it would change everything: design, safety, technology, even public trust. For the first time, people would demand more than what Detroit wanted to give. That was dangerous for business. Still, Tucker kept pushing. He built his factory in Chicago, promising to mass-produce 50 cars a day. He opened the doors to the press, showing engineers working around the clock. He even raised money by selling accessories and stock to everyday people, allowing ordinary families to be part of his dream. But that was also risky. Wall Street didn't like his methods. The Securities and Exchange Commission started watching closely. The pressure was building. Tucker had an enemy much bigger than himself. The newspapers started shifting their tone. What was once celebrated as genius was now painted as suspicious. Was Tucker a visionary or a fraud? They asked. Rumors said the car wasn't real, that it could never be mass-produced, that it was just smoke and mirrors. And then came the attack. Government investigators raided Tucker's offices. Headlines accused him of running a scam, of stealing money from investors, of tricking the public. Overnight, the man once seen as America's car savior was branded a con artist. But the truth was different. The Tucker 48 was real, cars were being built, customers were ready, investors still believed. But Detroit had the power, and they weren't going to let one man rewrite the rules of the industry. The question was simple. Would Preston Tucker survive the storm, or would the dream car that Detroit feared be destroyed before it could even live? The year was 1948, and Preston Tucker was running out of time. His dream car, the Tucker 48, was turning heads, but behind those admiring looks, powerful enemies were sharpening their knives. Ford, GM, and Chrysler had ruled the American car market for decades. They had billions of dollars, endless factories, political connections, and control over dealerships. Tucker had just one factory, one prototype, and a small army of believers. But sometimes, one bold idea is more dangerous than 100 ordinary ones. To raise money, Tucker came up with a daring plan. Instead of waiting for banks and Wall Street, he sold accessories, radios, seat covers, even custom luggage to future Tucker owners. He also sold stock to everyday Americans who wanted to be part of history. Thousands invested not just for money, but because they believed in Tucker's vision of safety and innovation. It was a people's car, and the people wanted it. But Detroit saw this as a threat. If Tucker could succeed by going directly to the public, what would stop others from breaking free of the auto giants? The big three had allies in government, in the press, and in the business world. And soon, those allies turned their eyes toward Tucker. Articles started appearing in newspapers, painting Tucker as a con man. Columnists asked if the car was even real, suggesting the whole project was smoke and mirrors. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched investigations. FBI agents raided Tucker's offices. The Chicago plant that once buzzed with optimism now echoed with fear. Workers whispered about spies, lawsuits, and shutdowns. But Tucker didn't back down. He knew that if he could just get 50 cars built, he could prove everyone wrong. 50 working cars meant mass production was possible. 50 cars meant his dream was real. He told his engineers to ignore the headlines and focus on finishing the cars. Every bolt, every panel, every detail mattered. The press tour continued. Tucker invited journalists to drive the car, to feel the safety glass, the seat belts, the turning headlight. Most walked away impressed, even stunned. But those voices were drowned out by a storm of negative headlines, all fueled by Detroit's fear. Then came the lawsuits. The government accused Tucker of fraud, saying he had raised money illegally and lied about his car's abilities. Headlines screamed, "Tucker on trial." Wall Street investors pulled back. Dealers who once begged for a franchise canceled their contracts. Still, Tucker kept fighting. He poured his own money into the project. He sold his house, borrowed from friends, and kept his workers paid as long as he could. And little by little, cars started rolling out of the factory. Real cars, not prototypes, not drawings. Real Tucker 48s driving down real streets. But the enemies were not satisfied. A grand jury indicted Tucker and his top executives. The government painted him as a crook, a man who had scammed hardworking Americans. They showed pictures of half-finished cars and empty factory lines, saying it was all proof of a con. What they didn't show were the completed Tuckers, gleaming and ready. The trial became national news. In the courtroom, Tucker stood proud but weary. He told the jury he wasn't a fraud, he was a builder. He wasn't selling dreams, he was making them real. His lawyers brought in the actual Tucker cars, driving them up to the courthouse steps. People gathered, pointing, amazed. The cars worked. They weren't fake. They weren't scams. And then came a twist no one expected. After months of testimony, the jury found Preston Tucker not guilty. He was cleared of all charges. The crowd in the courtroom cheered. Tucker's supporters hugged him. For a moment, it seemed like the dream had survived. But dreams don't always fall with a crash. Sometimes they die with silence. Tucker had won in court, but he had lost everything else. The trial drained his money, his factory, his investors, and his reputation. By the time the verdict came, the company was already gone, the factory closed, the workers laid off, the dealers moved on. Only 51 Tucker cars were ever built. 51 shining examples of what cars could have been. 51 symbols of how far ahead of his time Tucker really was. But instead of leading the auto industry, they stood as monuments to what Detroit feared most: change. Preston Tucker had survived the battle, but he had lost the war. And yet his story wasn't over, because legends don't die in silence. Sometimes they rise even stronger after defeat. Preston Tucker walked out of the courtroom in 1950 a free man, but freedom wasn't victory. He had beaten the fraud charges, but his company was gone. The factory stood empty, the assembly lines silent, and the workers had scattered. The Big Three had won. Detroit had protected its throne, and the Tucker 48 became a ghost, a whisper of what could have been. But what made the Tucker story so powerful wasn't just its fall. It was the way it revealed the truth about American industry. Detroit didn't destroy Tucker because his car was a failure. They destroyed him because his car was too good, too advanced, too dangerous for the giants who thrived on slow change and endless profits. Think about what the Tucker 48 offered in the 1940s. Seatbelts, shatterproof glass, fuel injection ideas, a rear engine, independent suspension, disc brakes, and a design that looked like it belonged to the future. Now ask yourself, why did it take decades for many of those features to become standard in American cars? The answer is simple: because the companies that ruled Detroit decided when innovation would happen, not the people who bought the cars. Tucker tried to flip that power, and for that he paid the price. After the collapse of his company, Tucker never stopped dreaming. He moved to Brazil, where he tried to design another car, the Carioca, but he never had the resources he needed. The shadow of Detroit followed him, and investors were afraid to be burned again. His health weakened, and in 1956, Preston Tucker died of lung cancer at just 53 years old. The man who could have changed the auto industry forever was gone before most of the world even knew his name. But legends have a way of surviving. Out of the 51 Tucker 48s built, almost all still exist today. Collectors treat them like treasures, restoring them, showing them at museums, and proving that they were never a scam. Each car is worth millions of dollars now, not because of what they cost, but because of what they represent. Innovation silenced, vision destroyed, and courage punished. Over time, the world began to see the truth. Books were written about Tucker's story. Documentaries were filmed. In 1988, Francis Ford Coppola directed the movie Tucker, The Man and His Dream, bringing the story to a new generation. People who had never heard of Preston Tucker before suddenly saw him as a hero, a symbol of the little guy fighting the system. And maybe that's why the Tucker 48 still matters, because it wasn't just a car, it was a challenge, a statement that said, we can do better. We deserve safer cars, smarter cars, cars built for people, not just profit. Detroit may have destroyed Tucker's company, but they couldn't destroy the idea he planted. Look at modern cars today: seatbelts, padded dashboards, safety glass, aerodynamic shapes. Many of those things were ridiculed when Tucker introduced them. Now they are normal. Tucker was right, but he was right too soon. In the end, the Tucker 48 is more than a rare car. It's a question. What if Preston Tucker had been given the chance? What if 50,000 Tucker cars had rolled out of that Chicago factory in the late 1940s? Would Detroit have been forced to innovate faster? Would safety have come decades earlier? Would the history of the American car be completely different? We'll never know, but one thing is certain: Detroit feared the Tucker 48 because it revealed their weakness. It showed that progress was possible, that cars could be safer, faster, and more advanced if only someone dared to build them. Preston Tucker dared, and for that, he lost everything. Yet today, when a Tucker 48 drives onto a stage at an auction, the crowd still gasps, just like they did in 1947. The headlight still turns with the steering wheel. The engine still hums with aircraft power. The dream still lives. And that's the legacy of Preston Tucker, the man who built the car Detroit feared.